All right. With that said, Marielle, the floor is yours. You are co-host in case you need anything, and take it away.
I'm not really sure what I was thinking, being the first or second person to sign
You
up
get
for
lots
this.
of claps. That's like very brave. So good job.
Like, I can do this. And then I was like, wait, what? So, which is actually really relevant to this chapter because it's all about fear, and how a lot of times you're your biggest challenge you get in your own way, pretty much. Which I thought was kind of funny because I, signed up not even thinking about it. And then this week I was like, oh my gosh, like what was I
What did I
thinking?
do?
I don't have anyone to follow aside from, the master who enjoys teaching this book.
Well, thank you, Marielle. My mentor taught me say yes and figure it out. So
Yeah.
I applaud you for that.
Well, I appreciate that. So, like I said, really like going into this, the biggest thing is, just overcoming your fear and fears that you tell yourself. So the first myth understanding is I can't do it, which, so many people, it's so easy to tell yourself that. And the truth is, until you try, you can't know what you can do. You can't get in front of yourself and, tell yourself that you can't do something before you even try. One of the things that really resonated with me in this chapter is, who has kids or like nieces, just like nephews, little kids that you kind of, want to see succeed. So Gary wrote about a class where he was in front of a bunch of parents who said, I can't do this, or, and then he turned the script and said, what would you do if I indoctrinated your children and said, we are going to be realistic about your potential. You can only do so much. The sky is not the limit, and we're going to find where your ceiling is. And the parents were like, no, I would never want somebody to tell me that. I would love, I want my children to achieve as much as they can. I want them to chase their goals and to believe that the sky is the limit. And Gary said, well, then why are you telling yourself something completely different? And it's something that, as a millennial parent, the internet is all around us, and we're constantly told, talk to yourself the way that you would talk to your child. And it really puts it into perspective, whether it's body image, I'm a girl mom. So one of the big things is don't talk yourself down in front of your child, because those habits are learned. But what if it was the other way, where you could say, talk yourself up, because that's how you're talking to your child. You want to believe in yourself, just like you want your children to believe in themselves. And it really stood out to me because I try so hard to tell my daughter, you can do anything just as long as you try, but you don't know unless you try. So that just, it really, it's almost like a domino effect. The other thing that he brought up in this was the 4-minute mile. John Landy, who is an athlete in Australia, he tried for 9 years to beat the 4-minute mile, and he was told it was impossible. And for 9 years he tried and he never succeeded. And then a med student named Roger Bannister started practicing in his lunch break, and he achieved it. He broke the 4-minute mile. And then after trying for 9 years, John Landy saw that someone else did it. And in 2 months, he was able to achieve what he wasn't able to in 9 years. And what Gary was saying is that after constantly being told it's impossible, it really puts a stop in your potential. But after 2 months, he was able to do it because it wasn't impossible anymore. So it's just that mental break and getting out of that mentality. It's almost like a domino effect. Once you see that you can achieve something, then you have that confidence and you're like, what else can I do? How much more can I do? So that is the first one. Did anyone have any thoughts, input?
Yeah, I love this. I use this example all the time when I'm teaching stuff, especially our newer agents. And I think because this is, again, this is mindset where everything starts. But what I love about that is it's not just mindsets, it's the actual belief that you can do it. And it goes back to like the vision boards and all those kind of conversations. But Yeah, I love that particular example and how to show people breaking it through, because John didn't actually do it until actually he believed it could be done.
Right.
Yes, and the interesting part about that is he did not focus on running a mile. He focused on quarter-mile increments and improving his speed in the quarter mile, and that's how he then beat the mile.
And he did that during his lunch break, by the way.
Right.
I don't know if it says that, I don't remember if it says that in here, but he did it
Yeah,
during.
it does. Yeah, which it almost makes it seem like to Landy, who really that was just his goal for 9 years. That was his focus. And then, you know, you look at this guy that's just doing it on his lunch break and achieves it. It's like, what? Like, if he can do it, then I can do it.
Power of the mind.
It truly is the mindset. Yeah, so the last thing that I did highlight in there is maximizing your potential is just about trying and never giving up. And again, going back to how you speak to your children, that's how, you know, I think most people want their children to be raised and have that mindset. As long as you keep trying and you don't give up, you can achieve something. And I guess, you know, maybe because as we're growing up, we get kicked out and we get pushed down and we get told, no, you can't do that. No, that's not possible. And that mentality gets, you know, that voice in our head kind of gets in the way, whereas kids are constantly raised and uplifted. So it's kind of about pushing out that negativity and being in the mindset of, yes, I can. So the next one is, it can't be done in my market, but the truth is, yes, it can, but you may need a new approach. So I don't know who's familiar with my background. My family owned a restaurant. And for 10 years, we purchased a building 8 years into owning the property. So we moved locations and I was a co-signer on that large purchase. So I kind of was like, if this doesn't work, then I'm not in a good place. So I took the restaurant and ran with it, kind of made it my own. And when I first started, I had been in Ohio, and who knows Ocean Prime, the restaurant that just opened. So Cameron Mitchell is the owner of Ocean Prime. He started off as a dishwasher. He was a runaway when he was 16, and now he has like $35 million in restaurant assets from coast to coast. And when I first started really diving into the restaurant, I remember reading an article about Cameron Mitchell, and his thing was always, yes is the answer, what is the question? His other way of running the restaurants were, the answer is yes, but. So yes, it might be possible, but how are we going to do this? And when I was reading this, it really did remind me of how I took what Cameron Mitchell's mentality is in running a business and put it into my business. Because just because it's not something that has been done in this area, has been done in the real estate industry, has been done in the restaurant industry, it doesn't mean that it's not possible. It's just looking at it in a different way and approaching it from a different way. You know, how many times have you had a client that says, you know, I haven't bought a house in 30 years, but this isn't the way that we did it 30 years ago, even though what you're telling them is something so normal to us. And it's because within those past 30 years, some agent or team or brokerage said, this is how we're going to start doing it, and we're going to make it work. And it just became normal to us because that was just the way that each new agent or each new team was taught, because we didn't know any different. So it's kind of, anything can always happen. You just have to look at it from a different perspective, kind of thinking outside of the box. If it's been done, Gary says, if it's been done in another market, then you can make it happen in your market. It might not be the exact blueprint that the market in Iowa used, but you have to really look at it and say, how did they make this work in their market, and how can I bring it to my market? And what did I highlight in here? So yeah, the first one to overcome this misunderstanding enjoys a distinct advantage in his marketplace. And when you're the person that says, you know what, maybe this can be done, then you're looked at maybe in the beginning is crazy, like they're never going to make that happen. You know, this guy just moved from California, and what works in California is never going to work here. But when it does work, you're seen as an innovator and somebody who is not afraid to take risks. And a lot of times in this industry, that's something that once it is successful, people really like to watch, you know, the people you watch articles, you know, who's to watch, who's next, who's up and coming. That's how those people get their names on the map, is because they're not afraid to take something that's never been done and put it in their market.
Mario, I have a really great example of that in my world. That when when we launched the first office, of course, we had the family fund and we had the challenges with our competitor that wouldn't pay us commissions. And I had never, ever, ever been asked this question, nor had I ever realized that I never had consciousness that I had never asked even myself this question. But after we got through everything, it was 3.5 years. It was a long battle. And I wrote a class called Culture is Rocket Fuel for Growth. And I taught it in a couple of regions. And when I was in the Southeast region, a team leader at the end of the class stood up and she said, hey, there must have been days where you were convinced this wasn't going to work out. Like, how did you push through that? And I actually had to go back and watch the replay of it, because I literally froze for about what felt like 3 minutes, because I had to go back and think about, had I ever actually thought that we wouldn't overcome this? And my aha in that moment was, I was like, that never even entered my mind. I was just convinced we were going to do this thing. And that's my, I guess, lollipop moment of got it. That's the power of mindset.
It really is. And I actually was thinking about this on, I forgot to add this in, on my way up to work. I was thinking about when COVID hit, there was no blueprint. My grandparents owned restaurants. So my family's been in the restaurant industry for 60 years. My dad he was the GM for Pops down in Nokomis for years. He would take restaurants that were not successful and bring them back into, into the green. And then he decided, like, why am I making all this money for somebody else when I can do it myself? So I learned so much from him, because he always had a blueprint for something. He always had the answer. If there was something that happened or came up, like, he had 90% of the time seen what had happened or had a response for it. My husband loves to say that the things that my dad has forgotten is more than we will ever know, like more than he'll ever be able to teach us in the industry. But then COVID hit. And I was like, the person that I always look to, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to overcome this challenge? There was no blueprint for how to run a restaurant or, anything in that timeline. The restaurant industry was hit so hard. I remember, it literally was like 5 years ago today. But we didn't have a choice. Like, we had employees that that relied on us. We had our own families that relied on the income of the restaurant. We had, the bills of the restaurant that still had to be paid. And so it was really just like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to change this model? And it's funny because even 5 years later, if you look at so many restaurants or even the 24-hour stores like Walmart, Walgreens, COVID was so unknown, but the people that were able to pivot quickly are the people that were able to continue their business, make their restaurant last, stay profitable. Obviously we're fortunate that we did have, the PPP loans and things like that to lean on. But at the end of the day, it's being able to say, like, how are we going to pivot? How are we going to make this happen? There might not be a blueprint, but we are, it can be done, and just looking outside of the box. So, unfortunately, some of the things that we had to implement in COVID were not things that we loved after COVID days, but we had created this precedent, and so many people have. Look at DoorDash. It was something that you only used when you were sick, or, your kids were asleep, or, you didn't want to leave the house. And now it's something that some people use it multiple times a day, because it became so natural. So just being able to pivot and look outside the box. You're muted.
It's interesting that you you said the last statement is people who can pivot quickly. And that is truly what I was trying to drive home with the agent I was speaking to yesterday is let's figure out how we can pivot your mindset. Let's figure out how we can pivot your activities. So that's really interesting. And it helped me to say, got to keep going with these agents.
Mm-hmm. And I think especially in this market, because so many of the agents that we have joined when as I was on my old team leader, Nikki, she calls it the unicorn years. And, you know, it was just like if you couldn't sell a house in those years, then like, you know, you could sell houses without doing anything. And now people are having to pivot and go back to what works or, you know, try new strategies for listings, getting buyers, whatever the case may be. And the people that are able to, you know, look and find a new approach are the ones that are really going to succeed.
That's why they have pivot shift ahead.
Yes.
Oh, imagine
Same shop.
that.
So popular.
Yeah.
We've been teaching pivot for years and years and years before anything happened, and it wasn't hard. So, you know, that was a hard sell. And honestly, COVID was the best gift he ever got because that's when that pivot shift ahead got created and went like as crazy viral as it is today.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, like that James has
Oh,
been,
yeah.
he was teaching, he likes to say he was teaching shift before shift was cool.
Yeah, he started that during COVID. It was all of a sudden Zoom was like immediately like the first week that people were like, oh, okay, well, there's this Zoom thing and this is how we're going to connect. He just jumped on there and just was like, we'll start teaching shift every day and still going.
Yeah, I mean, this is a prime example. If it would have been 6 years ago, like how many times were we Zooming? It was just like, okay, whose office are we going to? What time are we meeting?
Happy hours, the whole bit. Yeah.
Exactly. It really opened the door to so many possibilities.
Yeah. One thing I really loved and a takeaway, number one, I just want to say, I know you were nervous coming into this, but I just wrote down notes from some of the things that you just said to add into my class that I'm teaching.
Oh, thank you.
I was
So-
thinking about that too.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. New experience, like we can all learn from each other. So just giving encouragement in that aspect. But what I loved is I was reminded of Jamie Kern Lima's speech at Family Reunion and about how she mentioned that the makeup industry, it used to be a certain way. There was not inclusivity in skin types, skin ranges of like, there was none of that. And so now that is the standard in the beauty industry. And people literally told her for over 3 years that she was crazy for this idea that she had to be inclusive in the beauty industry, women of all shapes, sizes, skin types, whatever. And now genuinely, if like, I'm on TikTok, obviously, and like people are giving really poor reviews to beauty brands that are not being inclusive. Like it's completely just in a couple years, completely flipped the narrative in the beauty industry. And so like, that's what that reminded me of. And then on your first point, I loved the bold law, your cells eavesdrop on your thoughts. And I was told like, if I wake up every morning and I look in the mirror and I say, man, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm not worth anything, you will start to believe that. And that will start to show up in your day-to-day and how you represent yourself. And I just loved that part of it because I think that's so important to not only be like positive self-talk to ourselves, but to those around us, because we wouldn't look at your kids or anybody else and say you're fat, ugly, and worthless unless we're just terrible people. So yeah, I love that.
Thank you.
I'm going to piggyback on that also with one statement, and that's that our agents feel like they have to do everything perfectly from day one. And, you know, the analogy that I use when I teach Quantum Leap is that when a little kid is starting to walk, like what's happening to the parents and everyone around them? They're cheering. They're like, you got this. And, you know, the kid's like wonky and it looks funny and he's falling.
Right.
And you're cheering them on. And our agents need to realize, A, they need to do that for each other, and B, that's what we have to do for them. And we have to give them the perspective that they're learning to walk. They're going to fall down. It's okay. But we're going to, just like that little kid, we're going to say, keep going, keep getting back up, keep making this thing happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
All right, number 3. It would take too much time and effort and I would lose my freedom is the myth. The truth is time and effort are not the deciding factors in success. And I do have to show you, I was taking notes this morning and my daughter decided that oh, you can't see it.
You
Oh,
decide
it's
what?
colored. You can't, so Amelia was copying what I was writing. So it just goes to show like the way that can you see?
Oh, right,
Lori, so
yeah,
I
the
was writing
mirroring.
down and then she
Uh-huh.
was like, I'm writing what you're writing. So it just goes to show like, you know, whoever you're teaching or trying to, you know, I'm trying, what's the word I'm looking for? Just,
Influence.
whoever you're teaching or trying to
Mhm.
encourage, they watch you. So it goes back to that negative self-talk, regardless of whether you're in the office as a leader, if you're going around saying, oh, the market sucks, the market, my listings, then that it really does permeate throughout wherever you are, your mindset and your mentality. You can shift to the room based on that. But the thing with number 3 is time and effort are not deciding factors. I was joking with Elise this morning because one of the biggest things that I have a close friend who always says, work smarter, not harder. And that's really so much of this. So I ran out of time that I wanted to prepare myself for this. So on my way here, I listened to a YouTube video of someone else that was doing an MREA mindset on this chapter. And so I told Elise, I was like, you know what? I'm going to work smarter, not harder. And I'm just going to tell everyone to turn this on, this YouTube, and just listen to this guy because he's got it down. But instead I just listened to it on my way to work and got my mindset right. But it really is about efficiency and effectiveness. So many people that start in any business just feel that if they just throw their time and energy at their business, that it's going to make it work. But really, without assessing the time and the energy that you're spending, you're just spinning your wheels and burning yourself out. And I feel like that's something that is such a downfall for so many people. And I think it's a lot of times just because we were raised in that grind mentality, as long as you just grind and keep going and doing it, like it's going to happen. But you can only grind so much before you have to stop and say what's working and what's not. And being purposeful and being focused and just effective is really what is going to stop you from that burnout. That is one of the things that Gary says, is just being purposeful and effective with your time. Those are the people that are successful. And, there are so many books out now, like The Miracle Morning or Atomic Habits. And if you can almost, I don't want to say go through life, like just go through the motions, but on those menial things, like if you can create habits that kind of put you on autopilot for the things that are draining or are, not as exciting as you would like them to be, then that will help you create efficiency within your business, getting those systems in place and being purposeful with where you're actually spending your time.
Here's where I like to talk about that, Marielle, is I talk about dollar per hour.
Yes.
What's your dollar per hour worth? Because most agents have no idea what their dollar per hour is and how much they're actually worth. And I have them do exercises where they're actually learning. First, they're writing down what they're doing they shouldn't be doing because that's somebody else's job. And then the next piece is, who could you hire for less than your dollar per hour to do that activity? Because the more, if that's the one thing, we'll talk about that when we get to the organizational chart. It's the one thing about the organizational chart, because as you move up the organizational chart, your dollar per hour actually increases quite a bit too. And it's the leverage piece. It's because you're paying somebody cheaper than you to do it.
Right. Yeah. And spending your time on things that bring in more money.
More, yeah. Dollar
One
per
of the things that I was taught was not to spend, I don't remember exactly how it was, but basically it was, if you're paying somebody hourly, don't spend $50 to find 5 cents, when you're trying to look at where you're missing money, or, don't throw all of your time onto something that's not as important as what your time is.
And
I don't know if I
directly from the MCA. No, I'm just kidding, but no, for sure. Like seriously, I mean, I'll be direct with 2 OPs and 2 TLs and, agent services and MCTT. Like if I'm looking for 50 cents to balance, don't be mad, Ashley, balance the reconciliation for an account. Oh, I think this was $10.50, right? Because you're right, it is not worth the painstaking time to find 50 cents.
Exactly. Being efficient with your time.
By the way, I was going to recommend there is under the Work Smarter Not Harder moniker there's a Monica plugin that you can use for YouTube or podcasts, and it will summarize all the key points for it, and it's incredible. I use ChatGPT and it literally every single day.
Oh yeah. What is it called? Monica or Moniker?
Monica.
Monica with a K or a C?
Monica.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes watching videos, I'm just like, can we get to the point? Like, I don't care about, So that's awesome to know. All right, so anything else on the third one? Okay, so number 4 is it's too risky, I'll lose money is the myth. And the truth is risk is in direct proportion to how well you hold your incremental costs accountable to producing incremental results. So the way that this chapter opens is really funny because working with what Elise just said, when you're in a boardroom, there's always 2 kinds of people. One who says it costs too much, and they're looking at the dollar value. And then you've got the people that say we can't afford not to do it. Kind of that it takes money to make money mentality. And the thing is, you can't just like you can't throw money or throw energy at your business and hope that it works. You can't just throw money at something without assessing the money that you're spending. It's the same thing. I saw it in so many different restaurants owners who were like, I'll just throw all this money at it and hopefully something will stick. And they didn't really look, at their P&Ls daily. They didn't look at where their money was going. And in any business, if you don't have a mindset of where that money is going, then it doesn't matter how much money you have to throw at it. It's still not going to work for your business. So Gary uses the red light, green light, you spend the money and then you assess it. And then if that's working, then you move to the next thing before you just keep throwing money at something. And I thought something that was really awesome is when hiring an assistant or any employee, instead of looking at the full value of their salary, thinking, I can't afford $60,000 a year, but breaking it down into that monthly cost and telling yourself, I'm going to give them a 90-day probationary period. And if that doesn't work, and if they are not expanding my business, then I'm going to move on to the next person. So you're able to look at it as their 90-day cost, which is in the $60,000 example, $7,500. And that makes it a little bit more attainable and not as scary as throwing $60,000 at someone who may or may not help your business. One of the things that I was taught was to hire slow and fire fast. So it just goes back to that. Make sure that you're hiring people that, at base value, when they first start, they are going to add value to your business. But as soon as you realize that it's not working, don't, give them those 90 days. But usually if that's not working in 90 days, it's not going to happen. I can't tell you how many times I gave employees just chances or managers. And I was like, oh, well, they just need more coaching, or, oh, maybe they're just getting used to it. And 6 months later, I still had a crappy manager who I had just thrown even more money at and then had to start all over. So just really looking at cost versus investments. If you look at it as investing into your business instead of just an added cost to your business, it really changes your mindset of where your money is going.
Absolutely. And if I can just add one thought to this,
Absolutely.
where I see this come up most often with agents is when they're ready to hire their first assistant. So they're doing 20, 25 units a year, which is when they really should be attending career visioning and before they're really ready to hire and mastering that process, or at least having a sense of it. But agents do look at an admin as a cost. And the model for hiring the admin is to look for someone that A, is a great behavioral fit with the role. We don't want them to be like this. We want them to be this. Then B, when we're consulting with agents on this, you want to look for someone that has a good database established already. In other words, they already have community ties. So you're flushing that out as you're hiring them. And then when you hire them, their database becomes a part of your database. Plus, my expectations of an admin is that they're going to bring me 12 valid leads a year, preferably listing leads. And when you do the math on what the outcome of that is, oh, and there's one other thing: the admin's number one thing is to get the database to a 12-to-2 ratio, or at least to a 10% rate of return. When they do that, you're probably going to make a 4, 5, 6x on the salary that you're paying them. So it's also about the model of how you hire that person so that they make an ROI from almost day one. And I just wanted y'all to hear that, because I think that's a really key thing when they're making a hire, that they're not looking, or they're not thinking about some of those other things. They think it's just to do the paperwork.
Right. Just
Cool.
to have a body to take the tasks that you don't want to do. Yeah. It's so much more than that. And one of the things that Gary says with that is, evaluation, engagement, and patience, and just, constantly reevaluating and assessing how that person or thing, even, if you're spending money on a lead service, that's buying leads, and you still, just because the leads are coming in, you still need to stop and assess, am I getting my ROI? Like, it seems like I'm getting leads and it seems like I'm busy, but is it really coming back to me in the way that it needs to make it worth my cost? So,
And I think sometimes it comes from fear. If you hire too fast. I mean, I almost pushed Ashley to hire somebody that, thank goodness we didn't, because I was fearful that we weren't going to have somebody. And thank gosh, she pushed back, because now we have you.
No, it is. A lot of times when you're used to having your systems in place and you rely on another person, you do just want a body to fill that role. And sometimes that can be detrimental, because you're throwing money at something that isn't helping you.
100%. Good job. Yeah.
All right, this is a good one too. This is actually my favorite one. So the myth is, my clients will only work with me, only I can deliver quality service. And the truth is, your clients aren't loyal to you, they're loyal to the standards you represent. And one of the first things that jumped out at me is when you go to the Ritz, you are not loyal to Mr. Carlton. I actually have no idea who started the Ritz. Mr. Carlton. I was thinking Marriott, because I actually had a customer that was his executive assistant. But you're not loyal to that. You're loyal to the brand, and you're loyal to the service that is provided. The way that you're welcomed, the smell that you smell when you walk into the lobby, the comfort of the beds, the level of service that you expect, whether you're at the Ritz in Naples, or if you're at the Ritz in Orlando, or if you're in New York. And I think so many people feel that if they hire someone, it's going to cut out that level of customer service that their clients are expecting from them specifically. But if you can hire people and train them on your standards and your systems, then customers, clients, they're going to respect that you've grown your business and you've been able to grow it, but still maintain that standard of care and professionalism, business that they hired you for in the first place. Delegation is something that I really struggle with, but as soon as you learn how to delegate, and you learn that if you can find the right person and train them, you're not going to be spread thin. And sometimes when you try to do it all yourself, you are spread thin, and then you do lose that level of customer service that your clients hired you for in the first place. So if you can find someone to replicate your standards, your mentality, your systems, then essentially you're doing better for your clients in the long run. And going back to Cameron Mitchell, his thing is, if I invest in my people, then it will show through to my clients. It's his thing was, the customer is not always right, the staff is. And if I can train my staff, that was my big thing too. I was like, no, Like, but the staff is, and if you can train your staff appropriately and you know that your staff is backed up, then it will show through to your customers that if you invest in your staff and you have a happy admin, showing assistant, you know, front desk agent, if they're happy and they're supported, then the clients are going to be able to tell. I mean, think about how many times you've gone to a store, a restaurant, anything, and you can just tell, like, these people hate working here. And the person that started that business, you know, they didn't set off for that to be what they wanted their legacy to be, but something got lost in the mix. And then Mr. Ritz-Carlton is now not upholding the legacy that they went off to achieve.
I think so much of that just comes down to systems too, right? Like,
Absolutely.
I think that they can't rely on, if you think you can't rely on someone else to do the task, that means you don't have a system around it. And so many agents go, well, I can't have somebody else show my properties. I can't have an assistant do. Well, that's because you don't know. If you know exactly what you do and you do the same thing every time, then it's repeatable and there's no reason somebody else can do it. You just have to communicate to the clients what's going to happen. And I think a lot of times agents, just for people in general, they don't actually have a system. They're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants.
The system is them.
And so
That's the problem.
right, the system is them. And so the idea is, well, nobody else can do what I do. Well, there's a moment of having to get your ego out of the way and go, is it about me or is it about the things that I do, and what are the things I do, and how do I, and if you can take your ego out of it and go, well, let's just create a system around it. Anybody can learn a system. But that's really, I think, where people don't take the time to systematize what they just are, what makes them feel good.
Absolutely. Yes. That was actually one of the things that was in the chapter. It's your unique services are a byproduct of your standards. When you're training someone, whether it's your clients, because we train our clients, we train people how to teach us or to treat us, or an employee, whether you realize it or not, when you're starting off, you set the beliefs on how quickly you should respond to an inquiry, how a listing appointment should be conducted, or how, you know, difficult negotiation can be handled. You're setting those standards. And if you are able to articulate that to the person that you're training, then, you know, it carries over. And one of the other industry or companies that was discussed in this chapter was Disney. And the philosophy is the front line is the bottom line, which I think is so important. It just goes back to, if you have employees or, you know, showing assistants, that's your front line, and that's going to affect your bottom line. It goes back to the director of first impressions, right? Like, you know, the person that so many people think is just such a menial job is either the receptionist at an office, you know, the greeter at Walmart, the hostess at a restaurant. And really that is the first thing that sets the tone when you are walking into a business, or, you know, even just answering the phone. The person that answers the phone, if they are just grumpy and cranky, then you are going to go into this as like, oh, like, who am I calling? Like, if this is the first impression that you get, it already sets the tone or the mentality of what the rest of the transaction or interaction is going to be like.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%.
Thanks, Elise.
You're welcome.
And the sixth and last misunderstanding is having a goal and not fully realizing it is a negative thing. But the truth is, having a goal and not trying to achieve it is a negative thing. There's no such thing as failure unless you quit. You know, everybody's going to fail. The most successful people have failed so many times. You know, there's always that meme that's floating around social media that's like, you know, Oprah got declined so many times and didn't become a millionaire until she was, you know, 50 years old. And so, you know, J.K. Rowling from Harry Potter, she was on, you know, welfare, on government assistance. And then she wrote this book out of nowhere. And now she, you know, she became one of the most wealthy women in the world. there's always going to be a starting point. And like I mentioned, Cameron Mitchell again, you know, he was a runaway. He started as a busser. I think in 90%, 90% is probably a big number. In a majority of businesses, if you look back at who started it and how it became successful, you're going to see somebody who didn't see failure as an option, maybe had experienced failure, experienced something in their life that they said, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't want this to be my life. I don't want this to be my future, my legacy. And so they just kept going. One of the things that Gary says is using failure as a stepping stone. You know, is really just learning from your failures and moving on. And I think if you're going to fail regardless, but the key to success is learning from your failures and looking at them as a learning experience instead of as a failure. And then saying, why did that happen? How did that work? How can we make this not happen again? And, you know, just moving on, not getting caught up in, you know, oh, I failed again. Just keep going. And, you know, success is about trying. It's not about avoiding failure. And so many people, I was raised as like, I would get all A's and a B, and I would come home and say, oh my gosh, I got all A's and a B. And I'd be so excited. And my dad would say, well, why did you get a B? It wasn't about all my A's. It was, well, why weren't you perfect? And it really does create this mentality of being afraid to try, because perfectionism, what is the saying? Progress, not perfectionism. And just being afraid to fail really just creates so much just freeze in people, because they're afraid to fail and they don't even get started because it's that, what if I fail? So just keep going. The biggest failure is quitting and not chasing your goals and your dreams. That's the biggest failure, not falling on your face.
Yeah, I think when Gary Keller had his first office, he instructed his front desk to answer the phone, Keller Williams Realty International. And I remember him telling the story of them saying, well, we're one office. Why would you call it international? He said, well, because we will be someday.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And just setting that. Yeah.
And here we are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as you were talking, I was literally thinking back to Family Reunion and Jamie Kern Lima and her story, like as she told the story. And it was very powerful the way she told the story too. But all of the failures, and it was just like layered upon layered upon layer of failures that then turned out to be a, you know, multi-billion-dollar business that she created. And it was because she used the failures as stepping stones to grow from.
But to Kennedy's point, it wasn't even, I mean, it was failure, and we all experience failure. It was very personal failure. When someone says, you don't look like the kind of person that somebody would buy cosmetics from, I'm like, ouch, that's deep. So the perseverance to keep going, that's what it takes.
Well, in the mindset, the belief in it, like goes back to the first misunderstanding when we were talking about it. You got to have the mindset, and you've got to, what she called the knowing overcame the knows.
That's so good.
Yeah, I think too, a lot of times it's taking, like you mentioned, you know, she said, you're not the type of person that you look like somebody would buy makeup from. And people are nasty, and realizing that not taking everything personally, regardless of whether it's your failure, any feedback from someone, you know, that can really get in your head too. And just realizing, you know, not everything has to be taken personally. Not every opinion or comment or negative, nasty comment even needs to be like registered. Like, it's just kind of like, it's so like literally so elementary. Like, I'm rubber, you're glue, you know, those mean things don't have to become words in your head. You can just push that out. Because people get jealous when they see successful people. They think, oh, they must have, you know, their parents backing them up. They must have a wealthy spouse. They must have, you know, a trust fund. That, oh, they must have had something else happen. Because people are afraid of failure, and they don't want to really look at the fact that, no, this is somebody that wasn't afraid to fail, that has failed many times and has created success from their shortcomings. So.
Mhm. Yeah, and the comment you said about taking negative comments, like when someone does say something to you like that, I think that's obviously it's gonna hurt, because hearing that is never fun to hear, especially something as shallow as like your weight, because that's what Jamie Kern Lima, that's what the gentleman was saying to her. But that's why I think it is important to constantly be telling yourself, like, I don't get my value and my self-worth from you. I'm good. Like right here on one of my truths on my wall, it says Kennedy is a masterpiece of the creator of the universe, chosen by him before time even began. God said that about me, because that's my faith is a huge thing for me. So whatever that is for you, universe, whatever, like that's why it's so important. Positive self-talk, so that when someone says something like that, you're not like, oh my gosh, I already believe that about me. So like, you're right, you're true, I'm just going to give up. It's like, absolutely not. I don't find my worth in what you say about me. I know, because I tell myself every morning that I look in the mirror, I'm a masterpiece of the creator of this universe, and wanted and chosen and worthy. So I love that.
That's good.
That is good.
Just one last thing that I'll share on this, just a personal story around some of this, just the mindset and the belief. It's that the two most powerful words in the human language are I am, because whatever comes after that is what you will become. And at a stage of my life where I really realized I needed to take things to the next level, I wrote a series of I am statements, and I actually laminated them and I hung them in my shower. And I would read those off. There were like 12 or 15 of them, and I would just read them off, and I'd read them off, and I would read them off. Well, all of a sudden, like 6, 8, 9 months later, I look up and I'm going, wow, look at this. Like, I've actually done a lot of this stuff that's on here. Now, the funny part is my that bathroom, my mother-in-law would come and use it, and I would use the other bathroom, the main bathroom. And she had been there about, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. And she's like, all that stuff in your bath, I've been saying that to myself now because it's in your shower and I forgot it was there. And she's like, those are really good affirmations. So funny little story on that. But yeah, so for our agents, being able to be that encourager and remind them that affirmation of I am a great real estate agent, that's why it's in bold. Like, that's it. That's powerful. Cool.
Yeah, so much of it is just mind over matter.
Yeah.
And not getting in your own way, I think, is the biggest thing. And so many people they get in their own way because of their fear of failure. They're just their fear of getting started. Sometimes you're your biggest, objection.
Yep. And you have to do the Mel Robbins 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
It doesn't work for me.
That's it. Cool. Hey, give Mel a round of applause here. So good job.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
job
you.
fighting that off. Next week, Elise is going to be up with the attack strategy and the 9 ways the MREA thinks. So I really encourage you guys, think about where can you have conversations about this with our agents over the course of the next week. Who needs a random note of appreciation? I did that while I was sitting here because someone came to my mind. I was like, I need to say thank you. I appreciate you. Where do our agents have some misunderstanding that is holding them back? And those are really great hallway conversations just to ask and have and uplift them.
I was literally actually